Welcome all, Dax here. In today's video, I'm going to be analyzing and exploring the possibilities for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, as well as putting in my 2 cents in what I would like to see and what I think is most likely going to happen. I think it goes without saying, but there's spoilers ahead for both Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now that you've been warned, let's get into the video. Since I'm analyzing the possibilities for a sequel, I'm going to be going through some of the things that did and didn't work about the previous two games. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the combat. Now, the combat is probably one of my favorite parts about the whole game. The combat feels super natural. It's super fluid for both characters. And in Miles Morales, I really enjoyed how Miles had his unique spin to it. You know, he kind of felt like he knew what he was doing, but he wasn't quite a pro like Peter. I think I just had to do a couple little tweaks here and there to kind of add a little bit more spice. Because I know for me, at least, in the first game with Peter, I didn't necessarily use all the gadgets. I kind of gravitated towards one or two of them, and then I just kind of went from there. But I think they could really kind of, button down and focus on what gadgets they're going to offer the player. Probably the most important thing about the original game and the sequel, I guess you would call it, is feeling like Spider-Man. Both these games really succeeded in doing that, but just, fine-tuning some of the animations. I mean, that's one of my only complaints about these games is as good as the animations are between swinging and climbing up ladders and things like that, I feel like they could even take that to another level as far as making it feel more fluid and natural moving. The next thing I really want to shout out is the suit selection. The suits ranging from some from the animated shows, some from the movies even, and then you even have some originals in there as well. I mean, I think they're going to use all the same ones they had before, and probably just add in a couple more. I'm kind of having a hard time thinking of all the suits they can add. I mean, I know there's a ton of them, but like, they've already covered a lot of them, but I guess they're just going to have to get creative with some originals as well.
This is only half of the present. Well, what's the other half? I'll let you know when I find it.
Going into the story, I think in both games they balanced a feeling of new but familiar. So both of the stories felt like a Spider-Man story. Insomniac has shown that they can write a story that feels like a Spider-Man story without straying too far away from the source material to alienate audience. And I expect them to do this further. And it'll be interesting to see how they take these existing storylines that they've kind of set up. But I really think this game's going to go all in on the relationship aspect. Because, I mean, that's how you get good story, and that's what they've been doing. There is a couple things that don't really work in the first original game, and to some extent that somewhat carries over to Miles Morales. But I hope they avoid doing too much busy work and too many puzzles. I don't think it's controversial to say that most people don't like the puzzles in the first game, and I think Insomniac was listening because in the Miles Morales game there was none. There is still some busy work that carried over into that game, being a more condensed experience. It wasn't as off-putting, but there definitely was that element there. I think the key that they really need to focus on is having variety. In Miles Morales, you did see that sense of variety more so, especially with the Side Jobs app, but I think they can take it even further to make, the world feel a little more natural and lively, like everything's happening organically, so that way you're not just checking off boxes. Obviously, the number one thing that everyone was complaining about in the original games would definitely be the Miles and MJ missions. Everyone likes Miles and everyone likes MJ, but their missions, the stealth missions, were just not that enjoyable, at least for most people. I thought they were okay, I just feel like there was too many of them. It just kind of slows things down to a halt, and you just want to get back into being Spider-Man. I know they originally implemented that so that way the player could break up that sense of invincibility to really, make you enjoy playing as Spider-Man with those little breaks, but I think most people just didn't enjoy it, and I think that they got the message with Miles Morales, but it's hard to tell just because it was a condensed experience. I'm not necessarily saying you can't have an MJ mission, but I just think the repetitive, basic stealth missions are just not the way to go about it. The city looks great, and it feels great when you're swinging through it, but I feel like they could add more to it, make it feel more alive. I mean, one thing they could do specifically is make the NPC feel smarter, feel like they're actually reacting to their environment. Kind of like a Grand Theft Auto, or more specifically like how Red Dead Redemption's NPCs really seem to like feel like people. At least that was one of my personal complaints, is when you got down onto the streets, it didn't really feel like anything was going on. Now, obviously, this is a nitpick, but, I'm just kind of throwing ideas out on how they could improve this sequel, and I really feel like making the city feel more alive and like things are happening would definitely help accomplish that goal. Now, I'm super interested to see how they're going to tweak the gameplay, but a big thing that I wanted to kind of address is the possibility of having 2 playable characters. It just seems like a no-brainer. I don't know why they wouldn't, and it seems like, at least to me, it seems like they're setting that up. If I had to guess, I believe both Peter and Miles will be playable in a significant way. It's hard to tell. They might possibly implement a switch-on-the-fly system similar to GTA, where you'd go between the different characters as they're doing their daily lives. But I think it's more likely they will swap out the different Spider-Men based off of the sections in the story, kind of like the Miles and MJ missions, but actually fun, and both being Spider-Man. One of the big questions for me is, what are they going to do with the setting? I mean, obviously Spider-Man is a New York character. Without New York, there's no Spider-Man. You're not having Spider-Man swing around in Oklahoma. So the question is, how are they going to spice it up to make us, the player, feel like it's a new game, but also feel familiar, which takes me into maybe they could expand the map. I think a good way they could spice things up would be, let's say, 30%, 40% larger, and let's maybe throw Brooklyn in there, put part of the Bronx in there. Adding scale and size to the map would definitely make players feel like they're playing something new. The last thing I'll kind of address that they could possibly do that might kind of help as well is have some time pass. Say the games take place a year or 2 after after Miles Morales. The cities change. Original locations from the first game are no longer there. They're destroyed. You'll see construction changing things up. You'll have battle scars from the original games that could add a little more depth to the story and the universe, right? You swing by this one place that you had played in the original games, and now it's totally different because you were blasting through there with Rhino. And, things don't just get rebuilt overnight. That'd be kind of a cool concept for them to explore. Obviously, the most important thing to the story is what villains they choose. The first question that we need to ask ourselves is Peter gonna die? I don't think so, at least not yet. He's only had one game to this point. It'd be a little early to kill off such a beloved character, especially when he has so many relationships and stories to explore and develop. And Insomniac put a lot of effort into changing his face, so I don't think, they'd take all this time to do a face swap if they were just going to kill him off in a game down the line. But you never know. Insomniac's already broken canon by creating their own Spider-Man universe where Peter and Miles are wearing suits and they're friends and comrades at the same time. They're both Spider-Men, right? So I don't think they're going to kill him off. What makes their universe unique is having those two together. I think it's more likely we see Peter and Miles' relationship tested as Miles continues to evolve in his own right as a hero. Let's get one thing out of the way first. I don't think Donk is going to be the villain. I mean, even though he clearly is coming back at some point, I highly doubt he's going to be in this game. I don't think they want to, go straight back to him when Peter has such a large gallery of existing villains to choose from. So it just doesn't make sense. As I said, I think he will be back. I just don't think he's going to have a significant role, if any, in this game. I think the most likely plot route is going to tie in with the symbiote storyline. Obviously, we have the ending of the original game, the post-credit scene, which kind of hints at that, but I think Venom would be a clear first choice due to his fan obsession and piles of good storylines to play off of. This could tie back into Peter's relationship with Miles being tested by, possibly the symbiote Spider-Man suit, leaving Miles to help save Peter from himself, that could be an interesting way they kind of bounce those ideas. They usually have a variety of villains doing terrible things all at the same time. So, you'll have your main villain, you'll have your secondary villain, and then you'll have, like in the first game, you had the whole Sinister Six. But none of them had a major role, but they were all important to the story. And I could definitely see the sequel going a similar route. What gives me more reason to put stock into the idea of the symbiote suit is the fact that the suit was left out of the original game. Obviously, that's one of the most iconic suits in Spider-Man, so the fact that they specifically left it out as an option makes it pretty obvious they're going to go that route eventually. Just the question is whether or not it's going to be this game or a game down the line. Now, I feel like what they might do to kind of have an original twist on an existing storyline is to use Harry as Venom over introducing Brock to the storyline. I think if they were going to have Eddie Brock in there, they would have already kind of hinted at that. So I think they're actually going to go the Harry route. At least, that seems the most obvious to me. There's a chance the Green Goblin can be in this game. He was hinted at as well. I mean, obviously Norman had a big role in the first game, and he's the Green Goblin. So it'd be interesting to see how they're going to balance that if they do decide to go that route. One thing they could do is use Norman as an early to mid-game villain, kind of like Mr. Negative was in the original game, and then use Venom as the big baddie, kind of like how Doc Ock was. I'm just kind of spitballing ideas here. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to both be implemented because they're both, massive villains. So I don't know if they would want to use both of them for the same game. But with Norman being the Green Goblin, it seems like it'd be a good time to insert him into the story. For sure, one storyline they need to finish in this game, as far as villains go, is the Taskmaster one. You solve his riddles, you fight him, and then that's it. There's nothing else. He runs away. And so we need to finish that storyline. They might give him a bigger role in this game, but he might also just be pushed aside as a continued side story, kind of like how he was in the first one. As likely, but clearly exist in the universe already, he could be an early to mid-game villain distraction. Some of his trickery would be a good way to show off the power of the SSD, kind of similar to the techniques that they recently learned using Ratchet and Clank. So I feel like that would be a good way for them to carry over some of the things they've learned and harness the power of the PlayStation 5's SSD, but who knows? That's just an idea. And that kind of takes me to Sandman too. So similar to Mysterio, I don't think he would be a main villain. He'd probably be an early to mid-game villain, kind of as a distraction. And then there's Rhino, who seems to become a staple in every game. He seems to be the go-to villain to start off every game with the big bang, so maybe they'll keep him in, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. As far as release date goes, I'm going to make a prediction right here. I think the game is going to come out Q4 of 2022. So, between September and December. I could be wrong. I don't have a whole lot of evidence to support this. I'm just kind of going off of their, schedule. They released the first game at the end of 2018. They had Ratchet and Clank, I want to say, in 2016. And then they had Miles Morales in 2020. And then they're just pushing out again now the new Ratchet and Clank. So I know they have a couple of studios that all work together. They've been working on the sequel since 2019 from what I understand. I believe they're using a lot of the same assets from the first game, so that should make it a little easier. As my second choice prediction, if it doesn't come out in Q4 of 2022, I think it gets pushed back to Q2 of 2023, so like a May release of 2023. I do think it's going to be a PS5 exclusive. Utilize the power of the PS5 in ways that you just can't do on a PS4. If the game does get pushed back at all, I think it's going to be COVID related just because they're having a hard time getting some of the motion capture done. But again, I don't think it's going to push it back very far. So to recap, I think it's going to be a Q4 2022 release, like October, or possibly push back to Q2 2023, like May. Whatever Insomniac ends up doing with the sequel, I'm on board. I feel like they've been firing on all cylinders the past few years, making huge gains between each game they release. So I don't see how the games could possibly not be awesome. Just the question to me is, how awesome are they going to be? Let me know what your thoughts are below, and I look forward to seeing you next time, and thanks for watching. See ya!